Hello, I'm Jerome Ford, Managing Director of Ford HR Solutions. Everything that happens in organisations requires a variety of engagements between managers and staff members. This can create misunderstandings, disagreements, different perspectives, which, depending on how they're managed, can give rise to both positive and negative conflict. In this short series of programmes, we'll explore organisational conflict. What is it? Is it good or is it bad? How, as a line manager, should you address it? In our last programme, we looked at the problem of conflict in organisations, the need to look behind the manifestation of conflict to the process, policies, standards, and communications of the organisation. We discussed the paralysing effect of all the legislation and rules which govern the employment relationship. And we discussed the different impacts of positive and negative conflict. In this programme, before we talk about conflict management styles, let's outline some do's and don'ts. Do understand that conflicts are inevitable. If conflict needs to be addressed, do so quickly. Focus on the problem. Be open to solutions. Acknowledge how employees are feeling and listen actively. Simple, really. Don't focus on personality traits that cannot be changed. Don't disrupt. Don't attack. Don't disregard the feelings of the employees. Don't avoid conflict. Don't allow emotions to take over in conversation. And finally, don't impose personal values or beliefs. If we're honest with ourselves, we'd see that as we become emotionally involved in a dispute, we all fall into these traps. We should be aware that a moderate level of conflict across tasks has been found to result in increased team performance. I think that makes sense based on what we've discussed so far. However, conflict among personalities has been found to result in lower group performance. In other words, if you want to pick a fight, do it about a task. There are many styles which managers use to manage conflict. Which style to choose depends on the tactics and strategy that you need to use. As a manager, you're always faced with the classic confrontation between the individual staff member's needs and the organisation's needs. A big part of your job, well, it's always going to be conflict mediation. Sounds familiar? Your best bet is to try to accurately identify the cause of the conflict, who's involved, and what their relationships are. With this information, you can choose more confidently one of the following conflict management styles. The competing style is all about the use of formal authority and power, using force, hence the lion you're looking at. A very traditional way of doing things, which is still useful when quick and decisive action is vital, when unpopular decisions need implementing, such as cost-cutting, restructuring, or discipline. So do this when you're sure that you're right, when quick and decisive action is vital, when it's do or die, when you're stronger. Never start a battle you can't win, when acceptance is unimportant. Of course, you can also use this against people who take advantage of non-competitive behaviour. The friendly and coordinated dolphins. They're there to represent a style where you're attempting to satisfy both sides through honest and sometimes quite robust discussion. This is when you would be using a collaborative style. For example, when you both get at least what you want and maybe a little bit more. The classic conversation about making the pie bigger rather than dividing the pie. When you feel that both sides' concerns are too important to be compromised, you can't half the child here. You have to find something that's more innovative as a result. When you need to gain commitment by incorporating different people's concerns into a consensus. When there's enough time, or when the skills are complementary. Or when you want to avoid getting into a much more difficult form of relationship or negotiation at a later stage. And most importantly, with all conflict management styles, is bearing in mind the need to maintain future relationships. Now, things like trust, openness, and some skills are required by individuals for this style to be successful. I'm not trying to put you off it. It's a very effective style when done properly, but there's an assertiveness and an ability to recognise the rights of others, which sometimes takes time to balance into a line manager's skill set. You may simply give in to the other party. This would be known as accommodating. Sometimes it's the only feasible and sensible approach, particularly if you have a truly weak position. You do this where you want to protect a more important goal, or whether you want to trade an obligation for a later date, when the stakes are low, and I suppose most importantly, where the company liability is limited. You might do this to maintain harmony, peace and goodwill, or where any solution, as far as you're concerned, would be adequate. Where you lose anyway, don't pick a fight you can't win, or to gain time. Sometimes you may simply decide to avoid the conflict as a strategy. This would be known as avoiding. You would use avoiding where you can't win or the stakes are low, when the stakes are high but you aren't ready yet to engage in the conflict. Like accommodating, it can be used to buy time. It can be used to maintain neutrality or reputation. It's important to say, though, while this may appear neutral, avoiding difficult situations usually results in resentments. Notwithstanding this, it may be effective in some situations. Finally, the zebra, representing the classic compromise. You might act for the middle ground, where both parties may find a partial satisfaction of their interests. For this to work, both must be willing to give up something. You do this when goals are important, but you don't see the value in getting into a fight. You do it when you're dealing with someone with equal power to you. You do it for backup when collaboration fails. When you can't win, or you don't have enough time. You would do it to maintain relationships, and you definitely do it when you'd get nothing if you don't compromise. Okay, here's what the conflict management styles look like in a table format. Note that the decision-making you may apply to a particular conflict is probably going to be related to the balance between your concern for yourself or your organisation and others when placed against a particular conflict. When you understand the nature of the conflict, the stakes involved, and the needs of the people involved, you can apply any tactic or none to its resolution. The key to conflict management is to be able to think your way through it. Find a tactic that's honourable, fits the needs of the organisation, and respects the needs to manage relationships into the long term. Not all conflicts are the same. Techniques which are helpful to conflict resolution or indeed general problem solving. Creating a shared goal. Expanding the resources within an area, bringing in new staff. Avoiding the conflict. Smoothing, classic managerial behaviour, as is compromising and being authoritative. You can alter the human variable, or you can alter the structural variable. I love the phrase altering the human variable. It sounds like something you could phone in. You can stimulate conflict by using ambiguous, threatening messages. Most of us can do that before we wake up in the morning. Bringing in outsiders without considering their impact on the existing team. How many times have we done that? Restructuring the organisation. Did we think we were going to be able to close a division without it creating conflict? And the classic, the perennial, altering rules and regulations. If that's not going to create conflict, then nothing will. We should bear in mind, though, that there are circumstances where it's legitimate to stimulate conflict. A manager must take an ethical but practical approach to the management of organisational needs. Sometimes a change of rules, regulations, a restructure needs to happen in order for the organisation to progress and move forward. I hope this has been helpful to you as a line manager. Conflict is inevitable. There'll always be stuff for you to mediate between individual and organisational needs. There's a big difference between task and personality conflict. Figure out the cause of the conflict, who's involved and what their relationship is. Then choose one of the conflict management styles to deploy, based on the appropriate tactics and strategy. Sometimes you'll use power. Other times you'll avoid the conflict or give in. You may seek a win-win solution through collaboration or a split the difference solution using compromise. They're all fine, depending on the situation, the tactics you want to use, and where it fits with your or your organisation's overall strategy. Our next programme will explore the steps you should consider using when attempting to resolve a conflict. At Ford HR Solutions, we provide a range of services to identify and manage conflict in organisations and to increase the organisation's capability through your line managers to manage conflict in a way that adds value to the productivity of your enterprise. Don't hesitate to contact us for a free consultation.